Hi, so today we're going to be looking at external factors within education. So some of the things that we'll be looking at is why working class underachieve. We'll also be looking at reasons and specific examples for underachievement, especially with the working class. Another factor we'll be regarding is why middle class actually succeed and why they end up doing better than working class. And we'll also be touching on criticisms and key sociologists. So regarding the first section of this video, we'll be looking at cultural deprivation. Now it's important to note what cultural deprivation actually is, and it's lacking middle class values, ideas and knowledge. It's also important to regard that it's a disadvantage regarding educational success. It's further important to note that many working class students are culturally deprived, and that explains why working class underachieve. Moving on, we can now look at 3 factors that affect educational success within schools. We have subculture, language and parental education. These are all important to consider. So to begin with, we've got subculture. So sociologist Sugarman argues that there are 4 factors that act as a barrier to educational success within the working class subculture. First, we can look at the idea of fatalism. Now, fatalism is just the belief in fate. It's this attitude that what will be, and this can be an argument for why working class underachieve. Secondly, we can look at collectivism. Now, collectivism is when a student values being part of a group rather than succeeding as an individual. Now, thirdly, we can look at immediate gratification. Now, immediate gratification is the idea that working class students might seek pleasure in the present rather than making sacrifices that will better them in the future. Lastly, it's important to consider present time orientation. Present time orientation is the idea that working class students might see the present time as being more important than the future. This means that working class students tend to put less value on their education. Now, looking at these 4 factors constructed by Sugarman, we can argue that these are the reasons that can lead to working class underachievement within schools. Now we're going to look at our second point, language. Now, sociologist Bernstein distinguishes between 2 specific different types of speech used within the middle class and the working class. He calls these speech codes, and we'll be looking at both of them. So we can begin looking at restricted code. So restricted code is usually simple, short, context-bound vocab. Sentences usually don't get elaborated on or explained. These are most commonly used by working class students. Now, the second type of code that Bernstein distinguishes is elaborated code. This vocab is complex, long, and context-free, meaning it's elaborated on a lot. It's usually used by the middle class. The distinguishment between both these codes highlight why a middle class might achieve higher than working class. Now we're going to look at parental education. Now, sociologist Douglas argues that working class parents actually place less value on their children's education due to their underachievement within schools. Parents having little involvement with their children's education is another factor that highlights why working class students are underachieving. Another sociologist to regard is Feinstein. I think I'm saying that right, I really don't know. Anyway, he believes that a parent's education is one of the most important factors regarding a child's educational achievement. With working class parents not succeeding as high as middle class parents, it highlights the ideas on why working class children are doing worse than middle class children. Now, even though all these ideas suggest a lot, it's also important to regard the criticisms on cultural deprivation theory. Firstly, we need to look at the ideas on victim blaming. All the other points established ignore factors within schools and wider society that prevent working class students from achieving within schools. For example, it ignores ideas like labelling and streaming, which prevent working class students from achieving highly in schools. Another critical idea to regard is its cultural difference, not cultural deprivation. This idea suggests that working class are just simply different with their values and their beliefs. Working class students have to navigate through school and succeed within an education system dominated by middle class beliefs and values. This highlights the unfairness that middle class students might have to face within the education system. Now let's look at compensatory education. Firstly, we need to actually understand what this is. Essentially, it's just programs that are put into place to try and help tackle cultural deprivation. They do this by providing deprived areas with educational resources that might help. Now, there are many examples of programs that have helped to try and tackle cultural deprivation. We can look at the Education Action Zone schemes, Excellence in Cities, and then we've also got the Aim Higher programme. Now, even though these were put in place to try and help tackle cultural deprivation, we can still criticise it. Sociologist Hazley, I think I'm pronouncing that right, she argues that these programs did little to nothing in helping tackle cultural deprivation. This is because there weren't enough resources being given out. Okay, so now we're moving on to the second section of this topic, which is material deprivation. Now, material deprivation just basically means lack of material wealth. The examples that I'm going to look at is housing, we've got diet and health, we've also got financial support and financial issues, and then on top of that, we're going to look at fear of debt. Okay, so let's start with the idea of housing. Now, many of those in working class live in overcrowded homes. This means there's less room to revise and study, meaning it would take a toll on educational achievement. Crowded homes also lead to disrupted sleep, which can also have an effect on focus in school and leading to underachievement. Conditions in working homes might be worse, they might be poor and damp conditions. Unfortunately, this will lead to illness, which will furthermore lead to absences within school, therefore leading to underachievement. Lastly, we can regard the psychological factors. All of these ideas can lead to psychological issues within a working class student, leading to effect on education. Now let's look at diet and health. It's important to regard the sociologist Howard. He argues that working class children have lower energy levels than middle class children. Lower energy levels therefore means that working class students will be less focused within school. Poor diet and health can also lead to behaviour issues like outbursts and fighting, which is a disruption to education leading to underachievement. Once more, poor diet can also lead to illness, which again leads to absences, which means education is disrupted and it can lead to underachievement. The third factor is financial support and financial issues. We need to regard the sociologist Bull as he argues that many working class students miss out on educational enhancements. They might miss out on resources and experience that will help boost their education. And the reason they're missing out on these is because they are materially deprived and they can't afford it. Bull calls this the cost of schooling. Because working class students have to miss out on these educational enhancement opportunities, it leads to underachievement within schools as they don't have access to this. Working class children also might not have access to private education like tutors that middle class would. May lead to underachievement as they don't have the access to this enhancing education opportunity. Working class children also might have to work. Because they're working to support their family, it means they have less focus on their schooling, which will lead to underachievement. Lastly, let's look at fear of debt. Many working class students don't end up going to university as they're scared they will end up in debt. This furthermore highlights how working class don't have access to the educational enhancement opportunities that the middle class might get. Working class students also might have less choice and option of university. They might go to a university that costs less for tuition, but that means the standards are lower and furthermore they're missing out on educational enhancement. Now let's look at the capitals. 3 types of capital. So we've got cultural capital, educational capital and economic capital. Now let's look at what they each all are. So cultural capital is this idea of having middle class values, knowledge and beliefs. Educational capital is the idea that you're able to meet the curriculum of the education system and gain qualifications. Economic capital is the idea that you're able to move around in order to go to better schools who are higher on the league tables. All of these capitals are seen as advantages when trying to succeed within school. The The idea of having cultural capital, educational capital, and economic capital will lead to the success in the middle class. Because working class lack these capitals, it highlights why they underachieve compared to middle class students. To finish this topic, we can highlight ideas on why working class underachieve and middle class succeed.